Everyone, Mackie here, and welcome to another episode of Death of a Team. Now, you notice that in my Death of a Team rotation, I normally do like one team per region and talk about their deaths in the most saddened, incredible, but brutalized way without any business and all that hoopla. But unfortunately, the executive decision, myself, decided that in light of the recent news, or by the time this thing will be out on Wednesday, last week's news, that I decided to dedicate this entire episode to Los Ratatones and Cadron. Because I believe that their story is needed to be heard of, needed to be talked about, needed to be like celebrated, even though the way it ended kind of sucks for everyone, including myself. Because let's be honest, I was pulling them through to. I'm not saying go on and do everything much, but I was pulling them through to like continue the story and all kinds of stuff. But because of the whole situation that is around esports or the instability of esports right now, that is not going to happen. So, in honor of Cadril and the Rats, it is time for me to do a little death of team in honor of Los Ratatones. So, it is time for me to dive in. On the 15th of November 2024, Mark Cadril Lamont, a former player, former caster, who once a jungler, another mid lane, and the famous cancelled recall from his Malzahar play way back when, years ago. It was like the most poignant of his career. So after all of that work, he decided that, you know what, it is time for me to dip into, a little bit of creating an esports team and doing all kinds of stuff. And they decided that Los Otones will be the team that he's created. He will also be the coach along with the founder, which is kind of like it's a weird thing to have a founder and coach. We never seen like a founder and coach do something since George Halas in the Chicago Bears way back when, back in the 1970s or 1950s, of course, way back when, before that's happened. You don't see that in like traditional sports or esports and kind of stuff. But for Keijo to like build a whole team and all kinds of stuff, that is something. So, what this team is going to be comprised of? Young rookies, all this kind of stuff. No, they decided to become a streamer team. And they wanted to become a streamer team with the following people. First, they brought in the most dominant ADC at the time, former T1 Challengers member, and also former T1 substitutes. And by the way, world champion. I put that in air quotes because he didn't play, but he's a world champion, so who do I care? He decided to play for support, and his name is Reckless. Everybody knows Reckless? Pretty much done. Then you got a mid laner who talks a lot of things about the LEC. Talk about the mid laners not playing well, doing all kinds of stuff. A former mid laner great, also with Fnatic, of course, years ago. And wanted to prove himself, wanted to show up, wanted to be like the best player for one last ride. And that is why we brought in Nemesis. Then we decided to bring in a brilliant good ADC player who used to be on a BDS team that was one of the most brilliant teams in the last couple of months. And we decided, let's just give him a fair shot. Let's give him a chance. He's wonderful. He's talented and all kinds of stuff. Give it out for the king of ADCs and LEC, Crowny. And then we need something young, something proven, something, to give this team some kind of vibes, of course. The young jungler who's going to make this team go someplace and doing all kinds of stuff. Kids, say hello to my boy Velia. And finally, to literally top themselves off, we want a top laner who's been known to spawn a lot of Scion over the years, who's been known to farm Scion, create death, create some funny moments and all kinds of stuff. We want the best top laner to ever grace the game in our lives. And no, we're not talking about Keen, everybody. We are talking about the one, the only, the Bouse. And this is going to be the lineup, and to the surprise of everybody, this is going to be the lineup for the entirety of their run. The entirety of their run. Now, for the entire team, they decided to bring in Molecule, who, by the way, if you notice that he has a Twitter account, basically doing all the stats about League of Legends, all that kind of stuff. Molecule is your guy, of course. He's going to be the analyst. And Kieran is going to be the GM of the team. So that is basically the lineup. You got the founder, you got the coach, you got the team ready, and now it is time for them to see where this goal goes. Maybe it might be a good thing, maybe it might be a bad thing, but who knows? So first, they decided to play in one of those small little League of Legends tournaments. You know, those grassroots League of Legends tournaments that used to be valuable back then, way back in the 2014s, 15s, but back when League of Legends was like a no quantity thing back then, for the money and the franchising and all kinds of thoughts. They decided to play in the NNO Cup, being organized by No Need Orga. This team's first ever, let's say, call it real League of Legends, of course. And they were brilliant, only dropping 2 games the entire tournament, beating Katie's Mild and Fun 3-0, Nor Need Orga, the host, 3-1, French Flair 3-0, and Five Pigs, one team 3-1 to claim their first ever tournament and the brilliant, incredible prize of 10,000 euros. Awesome, incredible. Now, they realize, okay, great. They conquer a small tournament. What is next? What is next for this small team to do? Well, they decided to join an ERL team. Now, at the time, the NLC was used to be like the second best ERL team, of course. But unfortunately, due to League of Legends restructuring and ERLs restructuring, of course, that league has now become the third tier of the ERLs. Right below the Prime League, the Superliga, although it's no longer the Superliga, and of course, the highly claimed, highly touted LFL. Now, that tournament is taking place in Northern Europe, and they are joined by another content creator team in Jake and Dom's Rudy Sack, of course. But there's some other teams, of course, that are familiar. The lineup that they have in Group A consists of Lundquist, Lightside, Verndad, Bulldogs Esports, and Nord Esports. And Nord Esports is going to be a really tough opponent for them later on. But at the start of the split, they came out like a absolute house on fire, going 4-0 with Crowny being MVP and Bouse being unstanding rookie. Yeah, I know, Bouse being unstanding rookie, despite the fact he has not played professional league in a long while. In fact, I think this is his first time he ever played professional league in a long while. And let me tell you something about how unique this team is. Let me just tell you something. Now, anybody who knows Onivia, right? Onivia brought you highlights of like all the big regions, of course, at that time. I'm not going to go through all that details because I might get them in trouble, of course. They posted highlights of Lost Ratatones games. It's because of their personalities are great, the way they, bring in all the streams, of course, like streaming their scrims, which, let's be honest, I don't think players or teams of like tier 1 organizations can ever do what Lost Ratatones have done. Streaming their scrims, having the personalities, having fun, doing all this kind of crazy stuff. It was a blast. It was like the most fresh air team you will ever see in a long time. And reminds everybody for what happened years ago. Like I mentioned, of course, the old LCS or the EU LCS, NALCS, way back in the days when you got your TSMs, your Bay Live kind of teams, your Cloud9s, your Five Guys in a Room kind of thing. Those kind of, bedroom organizations that are fun, that are energetic, that is brilliant, and also do a lot of winning. Which I think it rubs a lot of people the wrong way. But at the time, it was like the greatest thing to ever happen to League of Legends at the time. But that was in 2025. We don't know how impactful that was yet. Let's go to the playoffs when they did, of course, absolutely demolish the entire playoff field. DMG Esports, 2-0, wipe off the back. Then Bulldog, 2-0, wipe off the back. Then they faced off against Nord Esports 3-1, and then faced them in a rematch and clean sweep them to win the NLC winter within a space of for like what, 3 months? Like 2 months. 2 months. In the space of 2 months, this team went from created by a team, playing in one of those low layer cup to win an NLC title, which is the third tier of ERLs, but a title nonetheless. And now they get to qualify for the biggest League of Legends tournament ever. And no, not Worlds. That's far away from their expectations. The EMEA Masters. Now, if anybody don't know about the EMEA Masters, the EMEA Masters used to be one of the most prestigious tournaments in all of Tier 2 right now. Because right now, I don't see the LCS doing anything much for Tier 2. The LCK Tier 2, not much. And the LPL Tier 2 is like whatever. The EMEA Masters was like a big thing. I never get to watch the EMEA Masters as much, but I knew that the EMEA Masters was a big thing. It's where like the big stars from tomorrow become the biggest stars here today. You got your Carsies, you got your humanoids, you got your your caps. Well, of course, back in when it was called the EU LCS Challenger Series. But the point remains that the EMA Masters was a big deal for Tier 2 League of Legends. And consider the circumstances we are right now, I don't think that's going to happen, of course. But let's just say Los Angeles have brought a lot of eyeballs, a lot of viewership to even a Tier 2 league. Like even a Tier 2 tournament, they have brought numerous, numerous eyeballs, like viewership off the roof for every match they play. And, and they keep on being successful. They just keep on being successful. In the GSL style group, which is, by the way, in case many people do not know GSL from the StarCraft days, it is pretty much simple. It is opening matchups, then winners face winners, and then the winners will go through, and then the losers face losers, loser goes out, and then the loser of the winners matchup will face off against the winners of the losers matchup, and the last team standing will go through along with the winners of that matchup. Got it. So it's basically double elimination in a double elimination. And they were drawn into Nightbirds, Carmen Core Blue, and E White and Fetch. Now we're gonna get to cards soon. Now, Carmen Core Blue is, by the way, the sister team of the Carmen Corp team that at the time of their at this time, they went on to win the LEC winter and then of course qualify for their first international final at first stand. Although you could say that first stand is a Mickey Mouse tournament at that point. But they made a final, so that's all that matters. And KCB Blue have some of the decent players like Yukindo, of course, an example. And that's basically it. I barely don't know. But they were part of the most successful organization in all of French and all of LFL, of course. So they had to compete against one of the best organizations in probably one of the best tier 2 leagues in all of Europe. And the bad part about it, they failed to do that, of course. Did not qualify, lost to KCB, but that would and then of course beat Nightbirds and then beat A Wedge Fine to qualify for the quarterfinals. From there, they went on a tear. They beat Supermassive, Paparara Supermassive, the former TCL team and former Worlds participants who once upon a time used to qualify for like Worlds a couple of years ago. They beat them 3-2. Then Team Phantasma from HLL, which is the Greek league, of course, they beat them 3-0. And then in the finals, they did not face KC Blue. That's the surprise to everybody else. They did not beat KC Blue. In fact, they didn't even face KC Blue. They face off against LCI Japan Corp, who beat KC Blue in the semifinals to have a shot against Los Ratatones for the EMEA Masters title, and they won the whole thing. They won the whole thing. Now, at this time, around, let's just say, this year, they were getting so much love. And when they actually won the whole thing, it was a joy to so many people. Seeing Cajol actually win, even though Cajol doesn't win as much as a player, of course, to see his team be successful, it felt like we were successful. It feels like we have achieved. Because if he can do it, why not other teams have done it? But of course, that is entirely possible. Or impossible, of course, in the grand scheme of things. And you know what? I'm going to continue before I'm going to go pretty much off the rails. In spring, is a different opponents. You got Venomon Crest Esports, Cows Esports, Rich Gang, being in the same league with Verdant, and dominated that group again. 4-0, Nemesis crowning Reckless All Pros, Balas Velja's second pro. And the players were a little different. Now, everybody was thinking Los Angeles because of what they did in the EMA Masters, because of what they did in the NLC, winter they're gonna roll down the LEC the playoffs. I do not think so, because DMG, while they beat DMG Esports, they got bricked by Visichachi. Yes, he still exists, by the way, and Nord Gaming 2-0 to set up a lower bracket run for the ages. And my goodness, that lower bracket run was just absolutely nuclear. Veman Crest 3-0, Vernon 3-0, Rudy Sack 3-0. That was past dumb, of course. And then, of course, crush Nord in the rematch to win 3-0 and book themselves into another EMEA finals as a two-time NLC champion. And by the way, they had the finals in their in a stadium. By the way, they had the finals in the stadium. Like back then, way back when, like a couple of years ago, they never even got finals, of course, in most stadiums. They got it in online stadiums and all kinds of stuff. It's kind of like the same thing with Caitlin Clark coming to the WNBA, and all these other things changed. Maybe it's almost like was the NLC changed because of Los Ratatones, or because Los Ratatones, you know, NLC changed. I don't know. It's like egg or the chicken, which comes first. I don't. So they won NLC again. They qualified for EMA Masters again, and were drawn to Barca Esports, one of the best teams in Superliga at the time. Axel Lotti, the second best team in the Italian league, and Coughlin Hungry Knights, the Prime Liga third seed. And just like Winter, they won their opening matchup, lost their qualifying matchup, and then beat the same team, KHK, in a rematch to qualify the playoffs. And then, of course, the playoffs is just a different story altogether. 3-0 Nord, 3-2 Boostgate Esports, probably the only close series they have in best of fives, of course, in a long time. And then came BK Rogue Esports 0-3. And they beat Barcelona 3-0 to win back-to-back EMA Masters titles and become the best Tier 2 league pretty much on planet Earth. And pretty much the biggest story in League of Legends, not named Gen G, of course, and probably T1 in most cases. But at the time, this was a major story in front of like so many Reddit comments and so many like Twitters and Sheep Esports news articles. I don't know Sheep Esports like news articles, but they were a big deal at that time. They were a massive, massive big deal. And then NLC is just like automatic, of course. This will be 2025 NLC summer. Thank you. Let me just type that. Thank you. Undefeated in group staging, then dominating the NLC playoffs, and then they won their third NLC title. I'm not going to go through all of that. That would be like 20 minutes of your time. I'm not going to do all of that. We all came to see the commemoration, and I want to do that. But they just dominate the NLC summer like it's just nothing. The EMA Masters summer split was chaotic. And how do I say chaotic? Well, first, the format. They decided to not do this whole GSL group system kind of bracket stage. Instead, they wanted to do a Swiss stage. Yes, Swiss stage. It exists. To the absolute appalling for so many people. And me. Like, come on, dude. Anyways, I digress. They decided to do a Swiss system, of course, and the teams that remaining will go into the larger bracket to determine who's the EMEA Masters champion. And not only that, the winner of EMEA Masters, along with the winner of EMEA Masters will be playing against the best teams in the LEC next year, or in the recording, by the way, this year, at LEC Versus, and have a shot of qualifying for first stand. A long shot, but a shot nonetheless. And also, the two finalists get to go to Paris to qualify for the finals of EMA Masters. And that tournament was run at the same time as Worlds. Like, let's be honest. Like, you're telling me that this EMEA Masters tournament is going to run at the same time as Worlds? And there were some concerns about Los Antonio realizing that I don't think they're going to compete at this tournament. They've won 2 in a row. They've won like 2 NLC Masters and 2 EMEA Masters. They could just like take their ball, go home, not fodder were playing, all kind of stuff. So Riot Games kind of feel like they're back in the corner because this was their cash cow, or in the case, their cash riot. And they wanted to do, like, I'm not saying everything, but they wanted to do make sure that they will be in this tournament to bring the eyeballs, to bring the viewership, and all kind of stuff. They were close to having all of the donors. And let's be honest, the EMEA tournament would be an absolute disaster if they would have been out. If they would have been out, and it would have been like 100,000 subscriber viewerships, of course. But thankfully, they did. They did, and they managed to make it to the knockout stage despite the fact they were having a shaky 4-3 start in the qualifying playoffs, of course. Then they beat Vitality B 3-0, and then they faced an LFL team 3-1 in Galleons. And then they face off against the royalty of Carmen Corp Blue. Hey, look, Carmen Corp Blue is back. And they're out for revenge. And all they have to do is just beat KC Blue, qualify for the finals, win EMEA Masters, and establish yourselves as the best team in all of League Tier 2. And go with the LEC versus pretty much with all the momentum, all the stuff, and they couldn't. They got swept. They got absolutely royal swept by KC Blue. And then, of course, KC Blue went on to beat Los Heretics in the finals. And that means KC Blue qualifies for the LEC versus. So you're thinking to yourself, Akeem, well, great year, of course, in 2025. They get to win a couple of tournaments. They won EMA Masters. They, of course, participate in the, Red Bull League of their own, of course. Of course, Cage will get to be the host of the League Awards, which shocks, of course, a community-friendly award that is not Saudi-based, but a community-based awards, of course. Some of the Los Ratatones players were there. They were a fun team. The viewership was great. The attraction was amazing. So you're thinking to yourself, well, that's it. Even he said himself that I don't think if he has like $10 million on the door, he will take it and go to LEC, which I don't think it's happening because, listen, there's a 3-hour video by just recently posted by the Four Horsemen, which with Monty, Thorin, and Richard Lewis, of course. And I forgot his name, by the way. I totally forgot his name, by the way. But he's a lawyer, by the way. He's an esports lawyer, of course, and also a political figure, of course. But I'm not going to dive into it. And they talk about for 3 hours about what 2x KO, which is the worst thing that ever happened. Jesus Christ. But also talk about the whole franchising thing, and I think it's impossible at that time because. And I'm not going to go too deep into the weeds, but franchising really is a absolute, tying the strings, and you're going to be like stabilized for the rest of their lives. Now, okay, let me see. What I meant is that franchising in this esports space is a no-sum game in which you can be stabilized, but also pretty much not going to be the best team all year round. Like a good example for all of this was Fnatic. They used to be one of the best teams ever. They used to be. But now they're like a fringe playoff team and probably get beaten by almost every other team, which is not which in the eyes of Fnatic fans is horrible, but in the eyes of many people, dude, that's just not. And it's not just Fnatic alone. Look at SK, who has not been great for the last couple of years since franchising. I mean, BDS, and by the way, Shifters, of course, they're not great. And it just almost feels like, hey, guys, can we just relegate these teams and just that did? And there's like, I'm sorry, but my hands are tied. I mean, they pay the franchise fees. They got the contracts being signed. And even if we take out the franchise fees, there's going to be legal action. Legal action that's going to take months and months to even sort out. And I don't think Riot are the kind of company to even take months, of course. Consider everything they have gone through, of course. And I don't think franchising is impossible. And even like the teams and the example of Carmen Corp, who have been working hard, who has brought in the players and have the events to hype up the players, who even have the arena, of course, dedicated to this team, who have commented with all the streaming viewerships and all this kind of stuff. Even he had to fork over the money even to get there. And eBay, of course, get there as well. So it's like, in order for you to be in the LEC, you have to like pay arm and a leg to even get there. And even then, it's going to be like it will take them months to even become successful. And success in esports is just not forever in these cases. So while Los Angeles are doing well in tier two and all kind of stuff, the odds of them being in the LEC or any league, of course, let's just say LCS, it's highly impossible. Like even near airport with like Double Lift's team did that. They can even get a link, of course, in terms of viewership and vibes and all kinds of stuff. And they shut down. They literally shut down just months in advance. So it's impossible. It's impossible for bedroom teams or teams of content creators playing together and just like build a team and just go to the league and do well. It is highly impossible. And even then, you have to spend so much money year over year to even make like a deficit. And you're asking like debts and all the kind of stuff. And that is impossible for even him. Lo and behold, the LEC decided to give them the most weirdest olive branch you'll ever have in your entire life. So, how did Los Ratatones get to the LEC, despite the fact they didn't win EMA Masters? Well, it is part fan sentiment, but also part Riot BS. Let me just explain. Let me just explain what I write. So, after what happened, they got in by, and let me just paraphrase the quote by the way, the best team in the entirety of Tier 2 League. Now, half they would have worded this thing a little bit properly or just say the quiet part out loud, they would have been like, we are inviting the Los Ratatones to be part of this team. It will be a 12-team league along with KCB Blue, and they'll be competing against the other teams. You could have just said that, and I would have been like, it's BS, but fine. By not saying that and created the absolute mystery on their head to feel like, wait a minute, it's Los Ratatones. Dude, it's Los Ratatones, of course. You're putting them in for all of that because what's it because of Cajol, because of the fan base and all kinds of stuff. That caused a lot of anger, and a lot of anger from the KCB, the Carmen Corp fans, the Koi fans who have to fork over all the money to do it. The I don't think G2 fans are mad. Fnatic fans are mad. Most of the teams, of course, are mad. They were so mad a lot of donors being gifted an LEC slot by Riot. And I can understand. I totally understand, of course, of the sentiment, but them's the breaks, of course. They made the rules and they were signed up for being the rules, of course. So Los Ratatones are in the LEC versus, and yeah, they were like public enemy number one from like the first day, or like even like before a match even played. They were like the biggest enemies of like everybody in the LEC, from the casters to the players to even some of the fans. They were like public enemy number one. And they're now in the uphill climb. And unfortunately for Cajol, he does not want to be part of the uphill climb. He decided to be an assistant coach, of course, alongside Shaves. And in comes in the coaching position, former Vitality coach, former Sandbox coach, former Fnatic coach, former Carmen Corp Blue coach. In came the most sexiest man in all the podcasts, probably the most sexiest human beings in all of League, the great Yamato Cannon. He is going to lead this team to the promised land. And if you know all these things recently, and by the way, this is like a month ago, by the way, it started off rough, like absolutely brutally rough. Like they lost to the two Carmen Corp teams, KC fine, but KCB Blue, like why? Then they lost to Fnatic and they lost to Giant X. In hindsight, you're thinking to yourself, okay, these teams will go on to do well, but in reality, like 3 out of 4 look like absolute dog. But again, hindsight is 2020, of course. And many people going into that game against Heretics in that week 2 matchup thinking to yourselves, they're not going to win a game. They are not going to win a game. They are going to get bodied by almost every single League of Legends team. And by the way, this is best of 1, not best of 3, of course, which is weird flex, but fine, I guess. They made the rules, I guess. It's like, Jesus, right? Can you make a format that makes sense every year? It's like the LCS have a Swiss stage format for 8 teams and it was complicated as hell. And now you're making a best of one group stages because it's complicated as hell. Like, Jesus, Riot cannot make a decent format to save themselves. If I were the League of Legends commissioner right now, I will make a format for every single league and they will stick with it for the next 5 years. But then again, Akeem, this is esports. I don't think anything is stabilized. So you know what? Them's the breaks, I guess. Now, going to that game against Heretics, many people were thinking they're going to go 0 for 12, 0 for 11. They're going to lose every game. The community is having a bad time. The players are having a bad time. Like, literally, the players are having a bad time. And then came the breakthrough. Part of it was like crappy play and choking by the shifters. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, the Timu of the week winners of the last couple of days, the shifters, and Heretics, of course, crap in their beds, of course. But part of it was the beauty of Nemesis and the late team game finding, which pretty much helped them as well. They've got their first 2 wins of the year to go 2-4 and into the final spot of the playoffs. And that will be where they were for probably the rest of the entire tournament. Now came the week that pretty much defies their entire legacy. You got Core, you got G2, you got Navi. Navi, of course, a team that is just getting to league, but started to be like one of the real teams in the LEC. And of course, you know Core, you know G2, you know their history, of course. Former LEC champions, former Worlds participants, former MSI participants. They have like the history and aura, of course, and the fan base. The absolute fan base. And oh, by the way, there's a little note about that law to that shifters win. That game really broke Nuke. Like, don't get me wrong. That game literally broke Nuke so hard he had to go to Twitter and just crash himself. Or go on Twitter and having a massive crashing out. Like the crash out post game against the shifters was absolutely brutally hilarious, of course. That they cannot believe they just lost to a last place team. Like, it's incredibly funny. And sad at the same time, but incredibly funny. Back to the situation at hand. So Koi, G2, and Navi, they were facing a daunting task. If they do not get like a positive week, of course, their chances are gone. Like, at that point, I was thinking to myself, okay, guys, you're going to lose to KC, you're going to lose to G2, and then you're going to beat Navi, maybe, and then you're going to be like 0-3, and then I think your chances are done, and I think you can pretty like play for the fans, you know, all kind of stuff, and that's just it. To the surprise of me and everybody else, they beat Koi, they beat G2, and they didn't beat Navi. They lost to Navi, but they beat Koi, and they beat G2. And I was like, oh my goodness. They're 4-5. They're in the fringe of playoffs, and they got 2 games left. They got SK and they got Vitality. All they just have to do is to win both of those games, and they're in. And at that point, and listen, Jat was part of the conversation, of course. Shynock was part of the conversation. Every single podcast that I didn't listen to anybody was talking about Lost Ratatones. It was like the biggest conversation news at that time. It was the biggest thing to ever happen in League of Legends in a long time. We have never seen a team having this much momentum in League of Legends since like 2016 TSM or a long time ago, of course. A streamer content team. Yeah, I know it's best of ones, but beating the best teams and making every single League of Legends owner feel foolish and making Riot Games look like absolute losers for even having them with no franchise fees and all kind of stuff. All they have to do is to just cash in. Just cash in the last 2 games. And they are in. And they are in. Now, will it be difficult? Of course it'll be difficult. You know, these are human beings playing the League of Legends games in front of thousands of fans and millions of viewerships and all kinds of stuff. Well, by the way, close to 500, actually almost 600,000 peak viewership. But you get the point. You get the point. It is probably the biggest weekend of Keijo's entire life since like his days in the LEC. He will never have another opportunity like this ever again. He may never have another shot like this ever again. And for anybody who don't know, I didn't watch the former. But on Super Bowl Sunday, I watched the latter. The former They beat SK, and I like cool, cool, great. The latter, I watched it. I remember this so clearly. Of course, it was around the same time as the Manchester City Liverpool Crazy Fest, of course, which the ending was absolutely crazy. And I was watching that game at that time. I was watching that game to see if they can make history. Now, Vitality are a decent, good team. They are not going to make this easy. And Vitality is like, hey, Baus, you play Scion a lot. We'll let you have the Scion, of course. And we're going to allow you to, do all kinds of stuff. And here is a little bit of statistical anomaly, of course, with this team. In all their games they have done, exception to the final game of the season, they have never have a goal lead within 15 minutes. In every game they have played, they have never have a goal lead, and they've won most of their games through late game, team fighting, and all this kind of stuff. They were the late game team. So I was thinking to myself at that time, all Los Angeles have to do is to make even, to be even at that time, to stay a little bit ahead, and which, by the way, they did. They were ahead at 15 minutes, which is like, uh, okay, like they're in uncharted territory for God's sakes, and with a chance to actually make playoffs, I mean, two things might happen. Either they might dominate the game, win the whole thing, and everything will be great, or they're gonna lose so poorly and everything will come crashing down. My eyes were glued to that match. My eyes were glued to that matchup. I was invested in that matchup, of course. And then, unfortunately, Cranium in lane dies. Battles is not tanky enough. Their Drake got stolen, by the way, by Veli, and Velia played the most incredible game, of course. They're probably the best game on the entire split. All year, of course. Pretty much all year. And unfortunately, to the credit of and let's give credit to Vitality. Vitality did not come in and become like roadkill for like the rats to come in. They made them hard to win. They made them hard to beat them, and unfortunately, they made a huge mistake to trying to get the kill, pushing mill, and all kinds of stuff, and it cost them. It literally cost them. And as Vitality walked down the mid lane, I know. Listen, I don't have a connection to this team, but my reaction must be feeling like oh yeah, it is brutally over. It is brutally over for them. Now, at the time, I didn't realize how brutal that loss were. They were coming in as a 90% chance. So even if they lure to lose, if things go their way, they're in. They're in. Like, listen, they lost to Vitality. And by the way, that was the very first game of the day. That was the very first game of the entire day. So now they have to wait for like the last 5 hours. And by the way, here's another caveat: there were no tiebreakers. So for anybody who don't know, they normally in the positions that need to qualify for playoffs every year they need to do a tiebreaker. But because of budget issues and the fact they cannot run a studio past midnight because of German laws, and that's a true thing, of course. You can look up Nightmare, of course, podcast with EuroLeague at that time. They did not want to go beyond midnight. And even then, they got Monday. They should just slot the tiebreaker match to Monday and it'll be fine. Because, and if we look at the table, of course, in hindsight, I think LR could be like one of those teams in the tiebreaker. I believe so. In my heart of hearts, the way they've been playing the last couple of weeks, I would have these two teams. I would have LR beat those two teams. I would have them in my heartbeat. But League of Legends and esports is all about what ifs and maybes and buts. It's all about the present moment. And at the present moment at that time, Los Ratatones are just sitting around and just praying to the League of Legends gods that they can qualify. They needed a few things to go their way. They need Navi to beat Koi. They need KC to beat Heretics. And they need Fnatic to beat G2. All they just have to do is to have like one of those conditions, and they're good. And they're good. And I have some very bad news. Neither of them happened. In fact, the craziest day of League of Legends literally happened. Hell, KCB Blue have like one win the entire split, and that was against the Ratatones team, by the way, in the opening weekend. And they got the second win against like SK. Yeah, they only got the second win. That's how crazy this day was. And Koi beat Navi to qualify for the playoffs, and I was like, fine, fine. Navi was pretty much qualified, of course. The matchup that really got a lot of ire was the Carmen Corp Heretics match, in which Carmen Corp have a lead. And by the way, Carmen Corp were like top of the table. They don't even need to win that game. But they had a lead, they chuck it all down, and now Los Ratatones are having some hissy fit. Or hoopla, as many people call it. Because of course, they were thinking, oh, KC just threw the match because it cost them the qualification. Now, I don't think that happened. I do, and if one player admits it, that would be like sacrilege, absolute sacrilege. I have seen many games thrown in LPL matches, of course, at that time, but I do not think that Carmen Corp threw the fans, and I don't think Joel is the kind of guy who just like get up and just like you threw the game, you're a piece of crap to come to like commento. Of course, he's not that kind of guy. I know Joel. I watch Joel. I know him. I mean, knowing Cajo that I don't think he's the kind of guy to do it. I just don't. So it comes down to the final game, and I remember this so clearly. I was watching that matchup at my father's workplace right before the Super Bowl, of course, in which, by the way, the Seahawks just absolutely give the Patriots the absolute beating of a lifetime. I never thought I'd say that, but here we are. And I was watching G2 versus Fnatic. Of all the G2 Fnatic matches we have over the years, this is probably the most important Fnatic G2 matchup of pretty much the entire League of Legends history at this point. Fnatic wins, KCB are in. Lost Ratatones are in. But most importantly, G2 are out. Think about it. G2 Esports, who have won so many League of Legends titles, won MSI, all kinds of stuff, could be out of playoffs for the first time ever. Just like the meme of a guy just playing a game and then lean back forward and just playing serious, Caps played the most brilliant game, pretty much the most brilliant Oriana game we ever seen, pretty much ever. And the moment that Fnatic just walked into the bush, got Sivir pelted, and then got Shockwave and got bulldozed and dominated, you can see in Cajo's eyes. And I think you can go on Cajo's stream right now, or at that time, he knew it was over. He knew it was over. He knew that this whole thing is over. He knew the run is over, and he knew that this team is over. Like, he didn't know it at the time, but everyone knew. Every single person who knew this team, who were fans of this team, who followed this team, knew it was over. It was over. G2 walk up in base, destroy the Nexus, and that was that. They qualify along with Fnatic. Yes, Fnatic qualified. I don't know why. And based on tiebreaker and BS rules, Los Angeles are officially out of League of Legends. And I was devastated at that time. I I I didn't say that they would go on and win LEC versus or qualify for first stand. But if you want to know how devastated this loss is, the peak viewership for that final day was 583,000 or close to 600,000. And that was LR's matchup with Vitality, the last matchup of the LEC. And that was probably the biggest, watch matchup in probably the year. LCS this year doesn't even have the numbers to compare it. In fact, they run the LCS around the time of the Super Bowl, which is like the worst idea ever. But then again, they can't go back to weekdays, so who am I guess? And I was thinking at myself, they are not going to get back those numbers again. The LEC at that point is not going to get back those numbers. And I said that in my rat poison video that I watched, and of course, like, comment, subscribe for all my videos and all kind of stuff. And I did meant it. I did absolutely meant it. And I did Cajol and all the players, and even Bows, who went on his stream saying he doesn't want to play anymore. They meant it. They meant it to a man. That they meant it. They do not want to be back here anymore. And unfortunately, on February 12th, 2026, and I'm recording this at this time, Los Ratatones, the most friendly, wholesome, brilliant Tier 2 league in League of Legends, who used to play for LEC, who was brought in by Cajol, did a 22-minute video, of course, and I didn't get to watch it, but if I watch it, I just don't feel like, I just don't want the tears to flow down. They are disbanding their team. And I feel like this is probably the saddest ever moment in League of Legends history. And I saw the first comment on David Scheinog's reaction video. Of course, it is a sad day of rain, which is an anime reference, by the way. It was a sad day for rain. It was the most. I have never in my life root for be sad for a team that's not my own. I don't even have a League of Legends team to root for, and yet I am sad about this because what they have brought to this league in a short amount of time, from the small org to the Red Bull League of my own to the NLC to the short time they have in the LEC, they have brought eyeballs and meaningful and brought fun to a League of Legends scene that we haven't seen in years. And I think, Richard Lewis and all the kind of people said the same thing. They don't care about the team, of course. They care about the players. Yeah, if like Keijo could rebrand the Los Ratatones to a different kind, but if you put like different players on the team, would the team be the same? Would it have the eyeballs? I don't know. I don't think so. This was a forever team. Reckless, Crowny, Nemesis, Veria, the Bouse. That was the team. That was their team. That was Keijo's ride or die team. And they have rided to all the success in the NLC, all the MEA success, all the scrims, all the fun, all the Red Bull sponsorship that they have, by the way. They were the most likable team, to some people, of course, ever. And I appreciate what they have done for the last year, of course, the last 2 years of their existence. And even though it was a short time, what they have brought to League of Legends in terms of eyeballs is something sweet and something precious, of course. And unfortunately, we will never get this again. Like, that's the sad, truthful part of it. We are never going to see this kind of team with the way they are right now, with the personalities and this kind of run ever again. And because the franchising being the way it is, and by the way, that's the death, of course, the franchising, and of course, the personalities that they have, and everything. I was about to end this whole thing with a 22-minute video of this, but I decided I cannot. I wanted to use this video as a way of showing everybody that Tier 2 League of Legends does exist. And when it runs by the right people with the right mind and give them creativity, give them content, give them something to believe with, it can be magical. It could be something. It may not bring you success down the road, but it may bring you incredibleness. I never watched a single Tier 2 League of Legends ever. That's the sad part. I never invested in a Tier 2 League of Legends team. But because of them, I can invest in every NLC highlight, every EMEA Master success. I get to watch it all. And it was the most beautiful thing I ever seen. So it's a wrap for them. It's a wrap for them. Keijo might go streaming, but he knows that the guy's kind of like close to 30 and he's probably have like other things to do other than League of Legends. And then you got the other teams, of course, leaving, of course. So that's the end of the road. And I don't blame them, of course. I do not blame, of course. They don't have the money. They don't have the time. They don't have the energy to do all the kind of stuff. It is what it is. And before I'm going to leave, I wanted to say one thing. I want to thank you, Los Ratatones, for everything you have done for League of Legends throughout the last 2 years, of course. What you have done for the content creation, what you have done for the game itself, what you have done for these people. I want to thank you, Yamata Cannon, Odawame, Molecule, Karen, The Bouse, Reckless, Crowny, Veria, and what do I name? Nemesis. Yeah, I want to thank all these people for bringing League of Legends happiness to the many fans across the globe, to the many fans across Europe, and to the many fans in me. You have made me a fan. And I'm sorry that this episode is a sad, sad day for you guys, but I hope, to quote the Dr. Seuss quote, don't cry because it's over, smile because it's happened. And thank God that this has just happened. So thank you all for watching this sad but wonderful tribute to this incredible, fun, young, incredible team. I hope K. Joel will find meaning in his life in the next phrase, of course. But even if he don't, I hope that this project is probably the best thing he ever done in his life. And if he were to, unalive himself in the next couple of years, I just hope that this will be talked about with his grandchildren and his children and his families and all kind of stuff. So yeah, and tell them that anything is possible. Like the current situation is impossible, but if you believe in yourself, if you put all the hard work and all kind of stuff, anything is possible. I may not have the biggest subscribers in my world, but I know that like him, when you have a fan base, when you have the content creation, when you have all of these things can happen. And on behalf of myself, thank you, Lost Ratatones, for everything. Thank you for watching this channel, and I will see you all next time for another Death of a Team. Goodbye, and happy